They only stopped for gas, a routine moment until it became the last time anyone saw them. No one knew the nightmare would begin at an empty roadside station. Case 1. Jessica Heeringa. Jessica was 25 years old, the mother of a 3-year-old boy. She was described by friends as warm and cheerful, always smiling but tired lately. Her job at the gas station paid little, and she worked evenings alone often until closing. That night she was scheduled to finish at 11:00 p.m. with no security guard and no security camera installed, something that would later haunt investigators. At 10:45 p.m., a customer stopped for gas. He paid at the pump, noticed nothing unusual. Minutes later, a man entered the store to buy a drink and found no one behind the counter. The register was open. Jessica's purse was still there, along with her car parked outside. The lights were on, but Jessica was gone. Police were called around 11:15 p.m. What they found was chilling. There was no sign of a robbery. Nothing was taken from the till. There was no struggle inside the store, but just outside the back door on the concrete, they found drops of blood. Not much, but enough. Later tests confirmed the blood was Jessica's. As investigators combed the scene, one detail immediately stood out. The store had no surveillance system. No cameras inside, none outside. There would be no footage of who came or went. Detectives canvassed nearby businesses, hoping another camera might have captured something. Anything but the angle of every lens failed to catch the station. Witnesses trickled in. A man who had stopped for gas recalled seeing a silver van parked near the store. Another said they saw a tall man with broad shoulders walking quickly toward the back of the station. He looked like he was wearing a red or orange sweatshirt. Some thought he might have been trying to talk to Jessica earlier in the evening. None of the descriptions were exact. The van, possibly a Chrysler Town and Country, could not be traced. The town reacted with shock. Flyers with Jessica's face appeared in every storefront. Volunteers joined in searches of wooded areas, fields, and parking lots. A hotline was opened. Tips came in by the dozens. Psychics called. False sightings were reported. Theories ranged from abduction to trafficking to a secret escape, though no evidence supported any of them. Jessica's family clung to hope. Her fiancé gave interviews pleading for her safe return. Her mother said Jessica would never abandon her child. But days turned into weeks. There was no phone activity, no use of bank cards, no communication. It was as if she had been erased. Police released a sketch of a possible suspect, a man with a strong build, short hair, and facial stubble. The sketch was based on the gas station witnesses. It generated renewed interest, but no solid leads. The case grew cold. Nearly 2 years passed with little progress. But in 2016, a woman named Rebecca Blech was murdered during a jog not far from Norton Shores. A man named Jeffrey Willis was arrested in connection with that murder after his van was linked to shell casings and surveillance footage. When police searched his vehicle, they found handcuffs, syringes filled with sedatives, and a locked folder on his laptop labeled VIX, short for victims. Inside that folder, authorities found disturbing content, hundreds of images of women both dead and unconscious. Some had been abducted, some were clearly being tortured. Police traced his past movements and realized Jeffrey Willis had lived less than 5 miles from the Exxon station where Jessica had worked. That discovery cracked the case wide open. Digging deeper, police uncovered an old report from 2014 years earlier that had been overlooked. A woman had called 911 claiming that she had escaped from a man driving a silver van. She said he offered her a ride, then locked the doors and tried to take her to a remote cabin. She escaped by jumping from the moving vehicle. At the time, the case had been filed but not connected to Jessica. Now, detectives realized that the van described by that woman matched the van seen near the Exxon station the night Jessica vanished. More importantly, she later identified the man who tried to abduct her as Jeffrey Willis. In 2017, Willis was charged with kidnapping and murdering Jessica Heeringa. Though her body had never been found, prosecutors built a circumstantial case using surveillance data, cell phone records, and testimony from multiple women who had been approached or attacked by him. At trial, the most harrowing testimony came from the woman who escaped the van. She described the interior in chilling detail, how it was rigged with restraints, a fake panel, and no way to open the doors from the inside. Another woman said Willis had followed her after work, and she only escaped by running into a crowded store. The prosecution's theory was simple and brutal. Jeffrey Willis had stalked Jessica Heeringa, waited until the station was quiet, and then forced her into his van. They believed he killed her shortly after disposed of her body and returned to his life as if nothing had happened. Willis showed no emotion in court. He refused to speak even during sentencing. In 2018, he was convicted of first-degree murder in the Rebecca Blech case, and then later in the kidnapping and murder of Jessica Heeringa. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Jessica's body has still never been found. The gas station where she vanished no longer stands. It was torn down a year after her disappearance. But on that stretch of road under the same sky, people still leave flowers. A small plaque bears her name. There's no security footage. No final moment caught on tape. Just a young woman working late who vanished into the dark, and a community still haunted by how close the predator had always been. After Willis's conviction, the story didn't fade, it deepened. Journalists began piecing together a pattern of behavior stretching back years. Women from surrounding counties described close calls, an unmarked van trailing them after closing hours, a man watching from across dark parking lots, headlights that never passed. Many of these reports had gone unconnected at the time. With Willis behind bars, it was as though the shape in the shadows finally had a name. Investigators speculated that Jessica may not have been his only victim. The content on his computer suggested a compulsion, a dark ritual. One folder contained hand-drawn maps with backwoods trails and abandoned sites marked in red. Police scoured these areas hoping for remains, but nothing definitive was ever found. For Jessica's mother, the absence of a body meant the absence of peace. Every year on the anniversary of her disappearance, she held a candlelight vigil. Jessica's son, now older, sometimes attended, holding a framed picture of the smiling woman he could no longer remember. The case spurred change locally. Norton Shores passed an ordinance requiring all gas stations operating late-night hours to install surveillance systems. Some stations went a step further, requiring 2 employees per shift, especially after dark. Jessica's name became shorthand for what happens when the system fails to protect someone working alone, unheard, and unseen. Over time, the town returned to a sense of normalcy, but something remained off. Some residents say they still check their rearview mirror more often. Others pause before entering a dimly lit station late at night. What happened to Jessica wasn't just a tragedy, it was a warning. A reminder that monsters don't always wear masks. Sometimes they drive minivans, smile in public, and live just down the road. And sometimes they watch, quietly, until the moment no one's looking. Case 2. Heidi Allen, Easter. Sunday, April 3, 1994, began like any other morning in New Haven, a small town in upstate New York. The air was cool, the roads quiet, and most residents were just starting to rise. At 5:45 a.m., 18-year-old Heidi Allen began her shift at the D&W convenience store located next to a gas station on Route 104. It was her usual early morning routine. The store was familiar to locals, a modest place with bright lights, vending machines out front, and aisles lined with snacks and coffee. Heidi, a high school senior, had been working there part-time while finishing school. Known for being responsible and well-liked, she had agreed to take the shift so another employee could spend Easter with their family. A few customers stopped by in the early hours. Receipts later confirmed purchases between 6 hours and 7:30 a.m., but by 7:55 a.m., when a customer entered the store, Heidi was gone. The register was unattended. Her car was still in the lot, No signs of a robbery, no struggle inside the store. Only her personal items, including her purse and keys, remained behind the counter. The customer flagged down a passing deputy, and by 8:00 a.m., a missing persons report was filed. Police arrived quickly. The parking lot was taped off. Officers interviewed early morning patrons. One man said he saw Heidi at 7:30 a.m. talking to someone outside. Another said a white van had been parked near the building, engine running. Within hours, the story spread. A young girl had vanished from a gas station on Easter morning. News crews arrived. Flyers with Heidi's face-brown hair, blue eyes, a soft smile appeared in windows across Oswego County. Search parties were formed, covering nearby woods fields and roadside ditches. As day turned to night, more details emerged. Surveillance cameras weren't standard at the time, and the D&W store had none. No video, no audio. Investigators were left with timelines built only from receipts and word of mouth. The last confirmed transaction was at 7:42 a.m. By the second day, dozens of volunteers had joined the search. Helicopters circled above dogs, combed through brush, and dive teams scanned ponds and creeks. Still no sign of Heidi. The working theory became abduction, possibly forced into a vehicle and driven away before anyone noticed. The community was in disbelief. New Haven was not a place known for crime, let alone a broad daylight disappearance. But the horror only deepened when local newspapers uncovered something that hadn't been public before. Heidi Allen had been working as a confidential informant for the sheriff's department. Her name had been listed in court documents that were improperly secured, making it possible that someone with access could have learned she was cooperating in a local drug investigation. It was a critical and chilling revelation. Not only had she disappeared, she might have been targeted. Police zeroed in on a man named Gary Thibodeau. He and his brother Richard both had white vans. Gary had a prior conviction for drug possession. Witnesses reported seeing a van matching theirs near the store that morning. The brothers were questioned separately. Richard admitted he had gone to the store to buy cigarettes, claimed he saw Heidi briefly, then left. Gary said he hadn't been there at all. Their stories didn't fully align. Cadaver dogs alerted near their property, and neighbors said they saw them cleaning out the van soon after the disappearance. But no physical evidence was found. No blood, no hair, no fibers linking Heidi to either of the men. Despite the lack of forensic proof, Gary Thibodeau was charged with kidnapping in the first degree. Richard was not charged. At trial, the prosecution relied heavily on circumstantial evidence and witness testimony. Some witnesses said Gary had admitted to being involved. Others described odd behavior, like scrubbing down the van obsessively or burning clothing. In 1995, Gary was convicted and sentenced to 25 years to life. But Richard, who had driven the van and interacted with Heidi that day, walked free. The case officially closed, left the public divided. Some believed Gary was guilty. Others felt the evidence was too thin. Even jurors later expressed discomfort, saying the case had too many holes, but the pressure to convict was immense. Years passed. Heidi's body was never found. Memorials were held on each anniversary of her disappearance. Her parents never stopped pushing for more answers. Her sister Lisa turned into an advocate, attending every hearing, speaking to the press, demanding transparency. Then in 2013, nearly 2 decades later, the case was shaken again. An inmate named James McDonald came forward. He claimed that a man named James Steen had confessed to abducting and killing Heidi, along with 2 other men, Roger Breckenridge and Michael Borer. Steen allegedly said they had panicked when they learned she was an informant. They had tried to scare her, but it got out of hand. She had screamed. They forced her into a van, took her to a cabin, and buried her body in a collapsed floor. This wasn't a lone jailhouse confession. Other inmates confirmed hearing similar stories. One said Steen told him they used a refrigerator to hide the body temporarily. Another said Breckenridge admitted to digging the grave. Newspapers ran the story. The public was stunned. If this was true, then Gary Thibodeau had been imprisoned for a crime he didn't commit. Defense attorneys filed motions for a new trial citing new evidence and suppressed testimony. The state resisted. They argued the new claims were unreliable, made by criminals seeking favors. But the inconsistencies in the original case couldn't be ignored. Judges reviewed testimony from Steen Breckenridge and others. Some refused to talk. Others changed their stories. Leads were followed into the woods, old properties searched, but still no body. In 2016, a hearing was held to determine whether Gary should receive a new trial. Witnesses described how evidence had been mishandled or ignored. Richard Thibodeau testified again. He maintained his innocence. Gary appeared frail in court, suffering from chronic illness. The court ultimately denied the request for a new trial. Gary remained in prison until his death in 2018. To this day, Heidi Allen's body has never been recovered. Her disappearance is still marked as unresolved. Some believe Gary was a scapegoat, a man with a record and a van made to fit a story under pressure. Others think justice was served, even if incomplete. But one truth remains. Heidi vanished in broad daylight from a place where she should have been safe, and no one, not her family, not the court, not the town, ever saw her again. Today, the site where the D&W store once stood looks unremarkable. The building was eventually repurposed, then closed altogether. Grass has overtaken much of the lot. No sign remains that a girl once disappeared from this spot without a trace. Every few years, volunteers gather to plant flowers or hold a vigil. Heidi's parents often return to speak her name aloud, to remind the world she hasn't been forgotten. Her sister Lisa has said in interviews that the lack of closure is like a wound that never heals, always raw, never scabbed over. The case remains open in the background of Oswego County, with boxes of evidence, faded photographs, and long-shot tips still trickling in. There are whispers of other suspects, of buried confessions never made public. But no one has ever been arrested beyond the Thibodeaus. Heidi Allen's disappearance was more than a local tragedy. It became a fault line. It exposed the fragility of justice, the imperfection of small-town policing, and the danger of secrets kept too long. And though decades have passed, the image of the teenage girl who vanished on Easter Sunday still hangs over Route 104, like a shadow no sunlight can erase. Case 3. Aniah Blanchard. It was the night before Halloween, October 23, 2019, in Auburn, Alabama. The air was warm and calm. 20-year-old Anniah Blanchard had just finished visiting a friend and was planning to pick up a late-night snack on her way home. She pulled into a Chevron gas station on South College Street around 11:30 p.m. The security camera inside the store caught her entering, browsing, then buying a few items. She looked calm, casual, wearing a dark hoodie and athletic pants. At 11:33 p.m., she exited the store and walked to her black Honda CR-V parked just outside. The footage ended there. She was never seen alive again. When Anniah didn't respond to texts the next morning, her family grew concerned. She had planned to visit her stepbrother that day, but never showed up. Her phone had stopped pinging GPS sometime in the early hours. By the afternoon of October 24th, a missing persons report was filed. Her mother, Annayia Harris, immediately drove to Auburn from her home in Homewood, determined to join the search herself. Police began by pulling the surveillance footage from the Chevron. There, in the grainy, time-stamped video, they saw Anniah, but they also saw something else. Moments after she exited, another man was seen lingering near the entrance. Tall, heavyset, wearing dark clothes and a distinctive limp. He glanced toward Anniah's vehicle, then the footage cut out. Authorities reviewed traffic cameras, phone data, credit card logs. Anniah's last phone signal had come from an area nearly 50 miles away near the town of Montgomery. Her car was missing. Her phone was off. No purchases, no social media posts. It was as if she had disappeared into the dark Alabama night. 2 days later, on October 25th, Anniah's Honda CR-V was found abandoned at an apartment complex in Montgomery. It was parked oddly, as if someone had exited in a hurry. Inside, investigators found blood enough to indicate someone had been seriously harmed. DNA analysis would later confirm it was Anniah's. The public reaction was immediate. News of her disappearance spread across social media, fueled by her connection to UFC fighter Walt Harris, her stepfather. Celebrities began posting her photo. Hashtags trended. Missing posters flooded college campuses and truck stops. The case had become national overnight. Tips began pouring in. One stood out. A witness reported seeing a man forcing a young woman into a car matching Anniah's at the Chevron station that night. Another tip pointed to a man named Ibrahim Yazid, a 29-year-old with a long criminal history. Just weeks before, Yazid had been released on bond for unrelated violent charges, including attempted murder. Yazid matched the man seen in the surveillance footage, same build, same limp, same face. Investigators put out an alert. By November 7th, after a brief manhunt, Yazid was located in Florida and arrested. He had tried to flee when approached by U.S. Marshals, but was caught and taken into custody. When police searched his belongings, they found Anniah's blood on his clothing. Phone records placed him at the gas station the night she vanished, and later in the same Montgomery area where her car was found. It was no longer a missing person case. It was a murder investigation. On November 25th, over a month after she disappeared, skeletal remains were found in a wooded area in Macon County, Alabama, about 30 miles from where her vehicle had been discovered. Forensic examination confirmed it was Anniah. She had been shot. The news devastated her family. Her mother collapsed when told. Her stepfather went silent for days. Friends who had joined search efforts withdrew in grief. The town held a candlelight vigil that lasted for hours with hundreds in attendance. Auburn had lost one of its own and lost her brutally. Yazid was charged with capital murder and kidnapping. Prosecutors announced they would seek the death penalty. Court records showed he had a history of violence dating back years, including charges of kidnapping, robbery, and attempted murder. He should never have been out on bond. That failure became a focus of national outrage. As Anniah's case unfolded in court, her family turned their grief into momentum. Annayia Harris began lobbying lawmakers to change bail laws in Alabama. She spoke at press conferences, appeared on news segments, and met with the governor. Within months, Anniah's law was drafted a bill aimed at preventing violent offenders from being released on bond. The law gained rapid support. By 2021, it was signed into state legislation. Later in 2022, Alabama voters passed it by wide margin as a constitutional amendment. What had started as a private nightmare became a public cause. Meanwhile, Yazid's trial crawled forward. He pleaded not guilty. His lawyers tried to delay proceedings, but the evidence was overwhelming: DNA, phone records, video footage, and witness testimony. Prosecutors painted a picture of predation, a man who saw an opportunity and acted with cruelty. The courtroom was packed during hearings. Anniah's family sat through every minute. Her mother once brought in a framed photo and set it in front of her as if to remind the court that her daughter was more than a victim. She was a real person with dreams of future and people who loved her. In 2023, Yazid was finally ordered to stand trial. Prosecutors reaffirmed their intention to pursue the death penalty. No plea deals were accepted. They wanted full accountability. To this day, Yazid remains in custody awaiting trial. The wheels of justice turn slowly, but the community has not forgotten. Every year on October 23rd, people light candles, post photos, and say her name out loud. What happened to Anniah was not a random act. It was preventable. It was brutal. And it left scars not only on her family, but on an entire state that had to ask why a repeat offender was free to take another life. Anniah's grave lies on a quiet hill in Homewood, shaded by tall pine trees. Her headstone is simple, engraved with her name, birth year, and a short inscription, "Forever loved, forever missed." And under that southern sky, her mother still returns, sometimes alone, sometimes with others, to leave flowers, to speak to the wind, to keep a promise made during the longest nights: your story won't fade. Not now, Not ever. The case also served as a wake-up call beyond Alabama. Across the U.S., lawmakers and citizens began re-examining their own pre-trial release systems. News outlets dug into similar stories, violent offenders out on bond committing new crimes while awaiting trial. Anniah's name became a symbol of the consequences of legal loopholes and systemic failures. Her college, Southern Union State Community College, established a scholarship in her honor. Professors recalled her as a hard-working student, always smiling, never late to class. Her classmates planted a tree near campus with a plaque bearing her name and the words, "She brought light." In the weeks after her funeral, Annayia Harris shared her daughter's final text messages publicly. They were casual plans to meet later jokes about classes' photos of a new haircut. They weren't meant to be final. That normalcy, frozen forever, was what made the case so harrowing. Anniah hadn't gone anywhere dangerous. She had stopped at a gas station, a place every person goes without thinking twice. Now many do think twice. Women lock their doors while pumping gas. They check mirrors more often. Stores in Alabama began installing brighter lights, more cameras, and extra night staff. Some even posted hotline numbers in bathrooms and on exit doors. The idea was simple. Never let this happen again. Anniah's law wasn't just a bill. It was a barrier, a line in the sand, to say no more second chances for predators who've already shown the world who they are. And though justice for Anniah may still be unfinished, her name carries weight. Her face is remembered. Her story has changed lives. And the dark that swallowed her that night now stands marked by something brighter: resistance, remembrance, and reform. The truth behind these disappearances is unsettling, and some questions may never be answered. Subscribe for more real cases that stay with you long after the story ends.